Hello my fellow weebs and welcome back to the One Piece saga, the series covering my never-ending journey of watching through One Piece for the very first time, giving my thoughts on it and ranking each arc in a tier list, to determine which is unquestionably, definitively, and definitely not just in my opinion, the best one. As always, if you're new to this series, I'd recommend going back to the first video to hear all the rules and technicalities which will help avoid confusion as well as spoilers. And before we get going, as some of you pointed out in the last episode, some of what we covered in the Alabasta arc, which is of course canon, was actually filler, and even though that does not really change my overall thoughts on it too much, I think it is worth mentioning. And so, going forward, I will also be following a filler guide, just in case some of the canon stories are padded as well. As usual, I'll link the one I'm using down below. With that being said, there is another major thing that needs to be acknowledged, and that is that we are embarking on a brand new saga today, which I am most certainly extremely excited for. Though we should still take a quick look at how the tier list looks right now. Also, you'll notice that with us entering a new saga, it is time to once again change up the color of the arc names. So every arc from the Sky Island saga will feature this green color. But alright, this intro is already way too long as is, so let us jump into the very first arc of the day. Goat Island. Yes, we are beginning with 2 filler arcs today, but don't skip ahead. I can't see stats by the way, as I've got things to say here. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We opened the arc with the Straw Hats trying to outrun the Marines we saw at the end of Alabasta, successfully doing so through a thick fog and arriving at a seemingly deserted island. After making landfall, however, they learned that it is inhabited by a man named Zenny and his goats. Long story short, Chopper believes that Zenny is dying and the Straw Hats stick around to help him with some chores. And jumping ahead a little, Zenny was by far my favorite part of this arc. Learning of his backstory, that being this pseudo-pirate where he would lend them money, was super interesting. And this is also where the Marines come in, believing that the island holds Zenny's treasure. But I honestly feel like they contributed almost nothing to this one. They're simply a chasing force to get the Straw Hats out of there. In terms of events, this one is nothing to write home about, but Zenny, along with his crew of goats, was definitely the highlight. Seeing him fulfill his dream of becoming a pirate was just fun to see, and the pacing of it was also very good. The arc is just 3 episodes long, so the more character-centric story worked really well here in my opinion. And yes, that is Goat Island. Indeed a very short but fun one. As I said, I absolutely loved Zenny as a character. I am honestly a little sad knowing that most likely he will never appear again since he was introduced in a filler arc, but I really wish he would. I think there is plenty of story potential in this sort of lending pirate traveler. In terms of ranking, there may be some recency bias here, as I think it was Syrup Village which really sold me on One Piece in the first place, so it will rank basically at the same level as Syrup Village, a very solid D tier arc. But now, let us get on to Luluka Island. And before I say anything at all, this is the textbook example of why I think filler is often so disliked. I think watching these 3 filler arcs back to back was a very good example of different approaches to writing a narrative that is not a part of the main plot, and why some of them fail completely. Unlike post-Alabasta, which was an introspective, character-focused arc, or the just covered Goat Island, which was a short and whimsical story of an old man fulfilling his dream, Luluka, for all intents and purposes, is written as a serious story. We won't talk about any of the events extensively, as they were honestly just plain nonsensical at times, but I do want to bring up a few of my biggest problems, and at least some parts that I enjoyed. The Straw Hats arrive at a town named Luluka, only to find out that this place is being ruled by a corrupt government, which extorts the locals out of their money for doing pretty much anything. We also meet Henzo, which is one of the highlights in this one. His character arc was magnitudes more interesting and impactful than the main plotline for me. Speaking of which, we find out that there's this mysterious rainbow mist that appears completely at random. Luffy, Henzo, Robin, and Usopp end up going into it, only for us to find out that there is apparently absolutely no way out of there, and that Henzo has been researching a way to get into this graveyard of ships, also known as Ape's Concert. Okay, the name is pretty cool. And this is where my main problem with this whole thing begins. This mist has trapped Henzo's old friends in a time bubble of sorts for over 50 years, and no one has entered here since. Yet here, we see it appear, then disappear, then reappear again, then we see some sort of extended part of this mist that you're trying to tell me hasn't been accessed during those 50 plus years, etc, etc. Frankly, the only things I enjoyed in this arc was Usopp taking charge for much of it, and the Henzo flashback of the Pumpkin Pirates. The rest of it, I honestly don't care at all about. The ending, I am a little mixed on, as we do see some timey-wimey business and that the Pumpkin Pirates have to go back to the future and are now arriving back at Luluka to meet Henzo. The whole going full circle thing gives this some points, as it was an interesting way to tackle it, but the rest, just meh. The whole mysterious mist being not at all mysterious and appearing and reappearing 50 million times, the extremely inconsistent rules about the flow of time within the rainbow mist, and so on. Yeah, that's Luluka Island. Overall, even though the arc was just 5 episodes, it was honestly very hard to get through. The stakes were absolutely non-existent for me, the villain was just a complete joke and it was just meh. You know, there are stories that are bad, and there's a lot to critique, but in this case, it's so short that I just blazed through it and that's it. I just forgot about it. You know me, for the most part, I try to be positive about these things. I mean, it is entertainment after all, but this one was just not good. So yes, this will be the very first F-tier arc. But with the filler arcs out of the way, let us get into the main course of this video. Jaya. Sheesh, was I unprepared for this one? Maybe it's because I was so disappointed in the Luluka arc, or maybe this one is just that good. But alright, let's go through it as we usually do. We open the arc with the Straw Hats witnessing a series of truly bizarre events. Firstly, seeing ships fall from the sky, and then the log posts pointing directly up, leading them to believe that there is an island above the clouds. And here we get a line that I couldn't help but chuckle at. Nami says that the log post is an absolutely set in stone rule that is always working as intended. Just like with Pell and his flight form in Alabasta, something tells me this little fact won't hold 1,000 or so episodes from now. Luffy then gets his hands on a map of Skypiea, confirming that there is indeed an island somewhere in the sky, which now becomes our main quest. Now the Straw Hats want to descend down to the bottom of the sea and try to find some records of this island in one of the sunken ships, but they are interrupted by the appearance of the Mashira pirates. This was a super unique character that I didn't really know where to classify in terms of allegiances. He was seemingly friendly, but at the same time threatened the Straw Hats, so I was a little bit torn. Later, of course, we will find out that he is indeed a pal, but we'll get to that in due time. The mission is once again interrupted by a massive turtle appearing and swallowing up the entire sunken ship. If I'm being honest, this was a bit of a weird sequence, as the turtle part seemed sort of pointless and only led to the appearance of the very mysterious giants. It's not really a criticism, as it was around for all of 2 minutes, but it just felt a little weird. But anyway, I have to talk about a specific scene from this moment, and that is the absolutely mind-blowing and stunning CG that we see here. I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've ever seen CG in One Piece, and this just broke me. I literally started laughing out loud at the PS1 cutouts that we had here. Though jokes aside, I think it is still fairly brave to incorporate this as far back as 2003. We've grown super used to it nowadays, with basically every single series incorporating it in some capacity, but up until a few years ago, CG was used very sparingly. So despite me almost dying while thinking of the PS1 Hagrid here, I was very surprised to see it used. And since it shows up for just a brief moment and we switch right back to the classic 2D animation, I doubt the 3D model was created just for that scene, leading me to believe that we'll see more CG in the future. This might be a hot take, but I am honestly interested in seeing it. Watching it develop and get better throughout the series could be a cool little side adventure for us. Editing Koroto here. Out of curiosity, I looked through some older episodes, and there are a few shots in the series that I suppose could have been done with CG, though it is quite hard to tell whether they've just layered animation or is it actually full 3D. So yeah, I do think this is still the first quote-unquote proper use of CG. Back to the video. And it is at this point where this arc just goes absolutely crazy. We cut to Buggy and Alvida, who we obviously haven't seen for quite a while, and we then see Ace pop up on their ship, leading me to believe that all of them will play into the climax of this saga at some point. But then we get a particular line that once again sent my mind racing, and that is Buggy saying, "Never mess with the Whitebeard pirates. He's the only one who fought neck and neck with Roger." Wait a second. Please tell me we will get a flashback of this battle. You can't just tell me that two legendary characters, one of whom is no longer even around, already have fought and not show me that fight. I cannot wait to see this. Please. We then see the Straw Hats arrive at Mocktown, a town largely inhabited and run by pirates. Luffy and the rest of the gang head off to a bar to get some more info on the mythical Sky Island, which is where we unknowingly meet Blackbeard. It is only revealed much closer to the end of the arc, so right now, I had absolutely no clue who he was. But yes, this is indeed Blackbeard. I will get into my reaction to the reveal later, but honestly, I was a little disappointed by his look. I much prefer the very classic Blackbeard look of, actually having a black beard. But we've obviously only just seen him introduced, so I wouldn't be entirely surprised if the reason why he didn't have the iconic look here was for the sake of the surprise reveal. But more on that later, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Just a few short moments later though, we meet Bellamy, a notorious pirate captain who's come to challenge Luffy with the intention of potentially recruiting him. This is followed by him smashing Luffy's face into the bar table, which escalates the situation as Zoro immediately draws his blade. Everyone is interrupted by Nami, however, asking whether they know how to get to Skypiea. And this is where things get very interesting, as they are laughed at and Bellamy goes on a monologue about how they are gullible children still pursuing some wondrous dreams. And during his speech, he just so happens to name a few locations that really felt more like hints rather than just random names he dropped. Specifically, he says City of Gold, City of Emeralds, and the One Piece. All of them have to be teasers for the future, right? But then, Luffy commands Zoro not to fight back. At this point, I was very conflicted. On one hand, I was like, what? Luffy not immediately blasting someone? This is way out of character, right? But with what we would see later, I think this moment is an absolutely wonderfully written one, as it showcases just how far Luffy has come as a character. Just like in Drum Kingdom once Nami was sick, Luffy knows that fighting here is pointless. Bellamy will obviously never see eye to eye with Luffy, so trying to find some sort of resolution here is just likely impossible. Instead, they simply stand there. Bellamy can feel like he won, but the Straw Hats know that they are the more mature party in this case. And speaking a little more broadly, most of the One Piece story has been about pursuing your dream. So finally seeing a character like Bellamy, who isn't just a baddie for one reason or another, and instead tries to directly call out their dreams as being childish, works perfectly in story in my opinion. So with all that being said, I think the inclusion of someone like Bellamy and Luffy not faltering in pursuit of his dream was very much a chef's kiss. And as if that wasn't already interesting enough, we see another interaction with Blackbeard. Again, keep in mind that at this point, I had no clue who he was, so him saying that the Straw Hats won the fight without ever throwing a punch had me very intrigued. My notes on this one simply say, hey wait, the cherry pie guy has much more to him, doesn't he? This was of course very much hinting toward this guy being Blackbeard, and I just missed it. Especially with the whole emphasis of him telling Luffy that the dreams of pirates will never end. And this scene, by the way, a chef's kiss indeed. Hello, another editing Koroto intermission. The amount of emphasis on the duality of Blackbeard and Luffy here is just insane. So I can't quite tell whether they'll be like very close allies or complete rivals. Either way, I am all in. Anyway, we then start hearing talks of a new ship, and oh boy was I excited. Just like with the outfit change back in Alabasta, these visual changes are so important in a long-running series, so I was all in. Soon after, we meet Sojo, who similar to Mashira, is using sonar waves to find things below the water. Also like Mashira, he appears to be friendly, but then they get into a conflict, and he's not so friendly anymore. And then the Straw Hats are just sent running. Another one of those fun characters that I didn't really know where to put. But before we move on, we did hear that Shoujo is aiming to become the 7th warlord of the sea, not knowing that it is actually Luffy who defeated Crocodile. Honestly, this is something that I didn't really think about. With the Navy covering up the fact that it was indeed the Straw Hats who took down old Crocky, no one really knows that it was Luffy, including all of these pirates we'll meet who once replaced the defeated warlord. This has very interesting implications that I am keen on seeing in the future, especially seeing how the rest of the world reacts to Luffy's bounty more than tripling after the Alabasta incident. Our search then takes us to Cricket, who tells us about the legend of Noland, a man who had seen several unbelievable things, including the Sky Island in question, but was laughed at by society for believing such things and ultimately executed for these treacherous lies. Cricket, however, explains that contrary to popular belief, Noland was actually an extremely honest person. But despite believing that Noland never lied, he wants absolutely nothing to do with the Mont Blanc family, and simply just wants to escape their shadow. I was already super vibing with this dude, but we even get a flashback of his crew leaving him alone 10 years ago after they accidentally made it to Jaya, once again laughing at Noland's lies. And we get the absolutely awesome line of, "This is a duel with the man who threw a wrench in my life." Chef's kiss. Cricket is an absolute Chad. It is also of course at this point where we learn that he is indeed friends with both Shoujo and Mashira, revealing that their whole salvaging shtick is them searching for the sunk gold Nolan spoke of. And yeah, I absolutely loved seeing these two back in the story. Their dynamic was on point, and I really hope they appear sometime post Jaya as well. But before we get to Cricket's plan of helping the Straw Hats reach Skypiea, we get to see Hawkeye again. Oh boy, you know things are about to get very real when we see this guy. I'll have to butt in with a bit of a meta comment here. My hype levels were already near the peak, but we haven't even reached the best part yet. With the ship now being reinforced and upgraded by Mashira and Shoujo, all the pieces of getting to Skypiea are falling into place. But they realize that they have no way of actually finding the knock-up stream. And so, a side quest of finding a certain bird that always faces the same direction and effectively functions as a consistent compass begins. The antics they get into while searching for it were absolutely brilliant. There's the complete role reversal of Sanji, Nami, and Usopp, as unlike in most cases where it is Usopp who's crying for his life, it's actually Sanji and Nami who are deathly afraid of all the bugs, while Usopp nonchalantly talks about how they're totally harmless. This was a great comedic scene for sure. Luffy, on the other hand, is looking for rare bugs and completely misses the bird that they actually need. And this gag would of course repeat later, which certainly made it worthy of the chef's keys. While the Straw Hats are out searching, Bellamy and his crew appears, and so we have the standoff between the Sarayama Alliance and Bellamy himself. Even the whole alliance is no match for Bellamy's Spring Devil Fruit, however, and so the Going Merry is destroyed, and Cricket is both barely alive and is robbed of all of his gold. Once the Straw Hats return, we once again see just how much of a Chad Cricket is though, as he isn't even bothered about the gold and just wants Luffy to fulfill his dream. This is the point I talked about before, where my thoughts on the initial Bellamy interaction were flipped. Now, unlike what we saw at the bar, Luffy does have something to fight for, Cricket's gold, and so he goes alone to take care of Bellamy, despite already running short on time to reach the knock-up stream. This shot of him arriving and calling out Bellamy was absolutely awesome, by the way. And their fight was brilliant, as we see Bellamy go off on his rant about not believing dreams, etc, and then charging Luffy, only to be just one shot. And the scene of one of Bellamy's lackeys asking where does Luffy think he's going, just for him to turn around and calmly say, the sky. Chef's keys. But one thing I want to mention before we move on. Why do you put spoilers in the title, One Piece? Can you please just not? You revealed that Blackbeard will be in the episode. Can you not do that? I was a little salty, okay? Anyway, now things get very real as we leave the Straw Hats and Luffy for a bit and travel over to the world government. And oh, we are introduced to even more of the warlords, and we find out that this meeting's goal is to go after Luffy. In other words, all of these very notorious pirates and high-up members of the government want to get rid of the Straw Hats. Now that's a yikes. And lastly, on the side of the government, we meet Lafitte, who is looking to replace Old Crocky. This is an aspect of the story that I am very interested in seeing resolved. Who will become the 7th warlord? Very interesting indeed. Perhaps it may just end up being a character we know very well. Someone like Luffy, perhaps. Probably not. But he also says that he belongs to the Blackbeard Pirates, and we see that none of them are really aware of who Teach is, which did put my mind to rest a little, as this does back up my theory of Blackbeard not really reaching his final form yet. But as if this whole world government business hadn't blown me away already, we then cut to Whitebeard and one of Shanks' men delivering a message. My notes when I first saw him literally say, "Geez, he is massive." And almost straight away we cut to the other side of this message, Shanks. Firstly, my notes again, Snow, and then Pog with about 50 O's. But we see that after Whitebeard ripped up the message, Shanks himself is going to meet him. Something very big is coming, isn't it? All of these major characters suddenly moving has to be hinting at something. But it is at this point where we get the bombshell. Firstly, we of course find out that this guy is indeed Blackbeard. My notes here sum up my reaction very well. Wait a second, the cherry pie guy is Blackbeard? He looks kinda whack. But we have another D. Don't take that out of context, as his name is Marshall D. Teach. I swear, by the time I'm finished with One Piece, the letter D will haunt me as much as those A's in The Walking Dead. But jokes aside, this very much backs up my theory of it being pretty much that Joestar birthmark type thing, as Blackbeard is supposedly super powerful. Though at the same time, Whitebeard does not have it, yet he is supposedly the same level of strength as Roger. Very peculiar indeed. Perhaps this is already telling us that Blackbeard is even more powerful than Whitebeard. Who knows? But cutting back to the Straw Hats, we see the new and improved Going Merry, now sporting literal wings. And we also get the awesome scene of Luffy already being late, but showing up saying that he would have been back sooner if he hadn't been looking for this super rare bug. This gave me a very solid laugh. But Luffy returns the gold to Cricket, and the Saroyama Alliance waves them off as they head straight for the whirlpool. Suddenly, however, Blackbeard along with a few of his guys appear, and he is blasted by the waves almost immediately, which was also a bit of a weird event. Was this to show us that he is bonkers enough to follow his mission, in this case hunting down Luffy, even straight into a whirlpool? I don't know, either way, I am absolutely looking forward to seeing him when and where he pops up next. But then, the iconic first OP We Are begins to play as the ship takes off into the sky. Next stop, Skypiea. And that's Jaya. An extremely surprising one to say the least, subverting my expectations in almost every sense. Starting from Bellamy, who I thought would be a bit of a weird adversary as Luffy didn't really do anything to him at first, which ended up being a far more nuanced way of showing us just how much he has matured, to the reveal of the world government, Blackbeard, and Whitebeard, not to mention details like Blackbeard also being one of the Joestars. I'm just gonna keep calling them Joestars, by the way, okay? So it should come as no surprise that I thoroughly enjoyed this one. If not for any specific large events, then just for the reveals and implications for the future of both this saga, as well as the story as a whole. It is also worth noting that, ignoring the filler we covered before, this is the first arc of the Sky Island saga, so much of what happened here is directly setting up the mega arc we'll be delving into next video. But with all that being said, Jaya will be taking the highest B tier, surpassing even Logtown. Again, with how many characters we were just introduced to, something tells me the next couple of arcs will be absolutely brilliant. And that's the video. Bit of a shorter one than usual, but there was absolutely no way I'd be fitting Skypiea and Jaya into the same video. Though it is worth mentioning that this episode was truly a roller coaster of emotions, with the absolute wonder that was Jaya and the downright nonsensical story of Luluka. But enough about that, let us still do the at this point regular thing of seeing how many of you stuck around until the very end. Leave a comment, whatever it may be, and include the word Greenbeard. Best comment gets 2 Mystery Shack points. Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you did all the YouTube things to let the algorithm know, and if you wish to support the channel even further, consider joining the Patreon where you can pledge as little as $1 per month and get access to all of the benefits. Speaking of which, a massive thank you to our current patrons who allow me to produce even more content for you all. I know I always say this, but seriously, thank you. All of my socials and links are in the description, but other than that, I want to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.